The Sportscast, March 23rd, 2022. If you haven't yet, please subscribe in all our channels, twitch.tv, Twitter, Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a review and also subscribe. Also, you can listen to us on your smart speaker. Visit our website, thesportscast.net, and you could also go to our app, The Sportscast. Sweet 16 is coming up this weekend, a couple of days off after a tremendous, surprising bracket so far in March Madness 2022. And a man that can break it apart and decipher it and mold it, Nicholas Hodell from Arizona State University. Welcome back to the Sportscast.
Thank you so much. I mean, those first and second rounds were probably some of the craziest I have seen in quite some time. But we got ourselves to the Sweet 16, and we got some very good matchups here. Very good matchups.
Exactly, good matchups ahead of us. Okay, looking back this past week, what are your thoughts? Which team has surprised you the most?
I think obviously St. Peter's has done a very terrific job beating Kentucky, which I'm not sure if too many people saw that coming. Then their performance against Murray State was just simply terrific as well. But also, Iowa State and Miami have both done exceptionally well to get their pair of upsets. Miami against USC, and then against Auburn, who they just absolutely destroyed in the second round. And Iowa State defeating LSU without Will Wade, but still a very solid win, and finding a way against Wisconsin to get that win. And now Iowa State and Miami, the 10 and 11 seeds, are matching up in the Sweet 16. I don't think too many people would have seen that one coming at all.
Which team has disappointed you?
I think the disappointment lies with, obviously Kentucky, who bowed out to St. Peter's. But really, of the Sweet 16, I don't think there's been a ton of disappointment within those particular teams. As far as the teams that bowed out, I would imagine that, Baylor, I mean, that was until they really roared back in that game against North Carolina. That was turning to be just incredibly disappointing, but they really fought back and made that quite the game for themselves there. But yeah, I mean, up the Sweet 16, I don't think you can be too disappointed with any of these teams for getting to this point.
Yes, and we got a comment from the chat. Ryan Christa says Kansas has the easiest road. What are your thoughts?
That's an understatement. I think that's a big understatement. When you look at some of these different regions and what they have to really go up against, a Providence team that they took up the teams in front of them. They did a very good job stopping a South Dakota State team that was shooting at a ridiculous pace, and then they kind of got lucky in that they had to face Richmond instead of Iowa, and Iowa was a very similar profile to South Dakota State. And Providence really destroyed Richmond. And so now you get this 1-4 game, and if Kansas wins this, they got Iowa State and Miami. Like, it's by far the easiest road, and that should Kansas get by Providence pretty solidly, like, they're not going to have a huge challenge to face in the Elite Eight. Now, obviously, Miami and Iowa State have proven themselves against pretty solid teams, but it's nowhere near the level of a Villanova in Arizona's region, or even Houston for that matter, Sweet 16 matchup. Nowhere near a Duke in Gonzaga's region. Nowhere near a Purdue, really, in either North Carolina or UCLA. So yeah, I mean, that really, to me, is a huge understatement. And that if Kansas blows it this weekend, I am not going to have too many kind words for them, because that is just simply blowing it, really.
Ryan also says, from Hoopstock, which you can watch every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, conference tourney champs disappointed: Iowa, Tennessee, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I really was expecting a lot more from Virginia Tech, in particular, what they went through the ACC tournament. Tennessee, oh, man. I mean, it looked so good in that first round, and then it just came crashing down against Michigan. and Iowa, like I mentioned, against Richmond. Richmond, another team that won the conference tournament, had to win the conference tournament to get into the NCAAs. And I thought that offense would be showing up a lot better than it did against Richmond. So, yeah, I mean, all three of those teams in particular, just heavy disappointments.
All right, so let's go into the West bracket. Of course, Gonzaga, number one, made it through, beating Georgia State, Memphis, and now they're going to face Arkansas. Arkansas, they beat Vermont, then New Mexico State. Tell us about this matchup. Will this be a close one? Is this could be an upset? What are your thoughts over this matchup?
If it's a close game, I'll honestly be a little surprised. Arkansas's offense matches up terribly against Gonzaga's defense. This Arkansas offense, not the best analytically. Their shooting percentages are not quite the best whatsoever. Meanwhile, Gonzaga, their defense is incredibly good. But the only thing they don't do at a pretty solid clip is force turnovers. I mean, that's it. I mean, they do almost everything else that they can control. You can't really control defensive free throw percentage. But almost everything else that they can control, they do incredibly well. And I would expect that Arkansas just doesn't have the guys to be able to go up against this Gonzaga team. I expect this to be one of the easier, hyped up Sweet 16 games. On the other side of this bracket, Duke and Texas Tech is going to be a phenomenal matchup. This is what I'm really looking forward to. Texas Tech's defense against a really solid Duke offense with the weapons they have. On the other side of the ball, things get a little hyped up in the Duke offense, Texas Tech defense matchup, but it's still what I'm looking forward to, particularly if Duke's defense. How is Duke going to be able to use that defense well? Because I think that might be the key. In the games leading up to the NCAA tournament, it was Duke's defense that let them down. And
do you think this Duke team?
They have gotten things, but
do you think this Duke team will be this will be the biggest test when they go up against Texas Tech?
Well, it's going to be coming. Well, I think the experience factor is going to be huge. I mean, that's something that is just it's a night and day difference. You're dealing with Texas Tech players who have been there and done that before in college basketball versus Duke, who has star power, but they're so incredibly young. And if there's anything that the NCAA tournament teaches us on an annual basis pretty much, it's that experience matters. And so that will be something I really look for. And it's not something you're going to be able to find within your four factors, your miscellaneous components in the KenPro profile. It's just to say that's very much down at the bottom in the personnel. And it's something I'm going to be very looking forward to see if that experience is going to come into play.
We'll see what happens, and we'll have Nick predict it. Let's go into the South bracket. Arizona, which is your favorite to win it all, is going to face Houston. Arizona had a gliding path. They beat Wright State. And then TCU by 5 points. What are your thoughts about this Arizona team? Are they in the right track to win it all?
This Houston team is one that would be very dangerous to count out. It's a team that I think a lot of people had doubted going into the tournament just because of when they beat Memphis in the American Athletic Conference Championship game on Selection Sunday. That was their first Quadrant 1 win of the season, which is almost unheard of for a team that is so well regarded in the analytics. And Houston proved the analytics completely right over the course of the first weekend, especially that Illinois game. That was just a thrasher of a game. So what we have in Houston and Arizona is number 2 versus number 3 in KenPom. And that is incredibly dangerous, I would say, for Arizona. But I think Arizona, if the TCU game taught them anything, that was their warning sign. Like, if they're not careful against this Houston team in San Antonio, Houston will beat Arizona. Like, they have the guys, despite losing two guys that are real well regarded earlier on this season, they just found a way. And another case of experience versus inexperience. Arizona actually ranks worse than Duke in the experience metric in KenPom. Arizona, within the experience metric, is just over a half year on average, which is very close to the bottom nationally. And Houston sitting there at 2.26 years. That's going to be something I will look to see. Is that going to be a factor in this game? Or will Arizona's height just be too much? That's going to be a game I am really looking forward to.
Might be the favorite game for Nick in the Sweet 16. Let's look at the other part, Michigan versus Villanova. Both experienced teams. Michigan went through Colorado State, and then they beat Tennessee. Villanova, they beat Delaware, then Ohio State. So both of them have had some big games so far. This should be a close one, right, Nick?
Yeah, this should be a pretty close game. Michigan has really picked things up over the last month or so. Another team that was very similar to Memphis that just had a terrible stretch in the year, found their footing, got into the tournament. In the case of Michigan, they advanced. Memphis played really well against Gonzaga in the round of 32 and then that loss there. But for this game in particular, if this ends up being a close game, Villanova should 100% win it. It's because they are a historically great free throw shooting team. 82.6%. You're talking about levels that I don't think we've seen in college basketball, which is just a free throw shooting team that's elite historically, not just this year nationally, in all time in college basketball. And if Villanova runs in a close game to the tournament, I would have fully expect them to win. And that free throw shooting makes them a dangerous team to get to the Final Four. It's a team that if you get in a close game with them and you're having to foul Villanova, I don't know who you can foul because they all can shoot the free throws pretty darn well.
It could come down to free throws. Let's go into the East. Another North Carolina team is going to face UCLA, which is doing a fantastic run. They beat Akron, St. Mary's. North Carolina, UNC beat number 1 Baylor, the champions. And hey, this North Carolina team, what do you think? And also when they face against UCLA.
This is the game I'm so incredibly looking forward to. Just the fact that we have a UCLA team that has pretty much all the tournament experience in the world from last year's run. So they know how to get to the Final Four. Against a North Carolina team that has been so impressive over the last month or so. And they've proven that in this tournament. Now, will the refs get involved is going to be the big question. I don't think a person in the world liked the officiating in the first couple of rounds, myself included. And the Baylor North Carolina game was a prime example of that. North Carolina cruising. Brady Manick gets ejected on what some would say is a questionable call. Caleb Love fouls out. Baylor comes roaring back into that game to get it into overtime in the first place. So the moral of that story is before key guys are taken out of the equation, North Carolina was cruising against really solid Marquette, decent team, Baylor, championship contender type of team. And so they know how to get this job done. And UCLA will present them a pretty solid challenge of all that tournament experience. But I will be curious to see if the shooting continues. It seems like guys like Brady Manick just were huge contributors. They could score in numbers, and I think that should really propel them through to the Sweet 16. But UCLA defense, not bad, pretty solidly in the numbers. But their adjusted efficiency is kind of nationally 13th. Individual metrics, not even close to that regard. So I would say this is a good matchup for North Carolina. It's going to be where that tournament experience for UCLA propels them if this game gets close because they know how to do this in the NCAA tournament.
Let's go to the other game. The surprise St. Peter's goes against Purdue, who I pick is going to win it all. Is St. Peter's the real deal? Can they overcome Purdue? Or Nick says the fun stops here. Let's get with the big boys. Purdue will do it.
Yeah, this is one of those instances to where I looked at the 3 Sweet 15 to make it to a Sweet 16 on last Sunday's show, the College Basketball Bonanza, which you can find on your preferred podcast platform by searching College Basketball Bonanza. But this St. Peter's team is unlike the other two. The Florida Gulf Coast team, the first ones to do it, were a pretty balanced profile. And Oral Roberts last year was more on the offensively favored profile. This St. Peter's team is defensively favored, which is typically what I like to see out of teams that I would project to pick up upsets. And this St. Peter's team has the numbers on defense to compete with Purdue. It's going to be, are the guards of Purdue too much? And quite frankly, are the bigs of Purdue too much? This is a team that has it on both the backcourt and the front court. And it's going to be something I will be very interested in seeing, because ultimately I think both the backcourt and the front court excelling for Purdue might end up being a bit too much for St. Peter's. But with that being said, something I'll be very interested in seeing, particularly in the first half, both of these teams, in their 2 foul participation rate, which is another unique KenPom stat, both of these teams rank near the bottom of the country. Purdue just at 5.1%, St. Peter's at 1.7%. So if these teams get in the foul trouble early, we might see some guys that we don't normally see in the end of the first half. And I might be interested in seeing where that phase of the game goes, if it does end up being to that point. I do think Purdue is going to be a bit much for St. Peter's, but I would expect this 15th seed, Sweet 16 game to be play out more like Oral Roberts last year than for the Gulf Coast. I think St. Peter's should be able to contend with Purdue and give them a pretty solid game. I mean, you just never know, right? I mean, this is one of those teams that has been so impressive to really watch, particularly against Murray State. That was so impressive against a team that had just cruised to the Ohio Valley Conference, had a decent non-conference profile, and St. Peter's pretty much beat them, which is really impressive to see.
So Nick is saying St. Peter's is the best number 15 seed you've seen in the past 10 years.
I mean, based on what I've seen in this particular tournament, I would say there is a 100% a debate, and it's a well-warranted debate. But from the way that St. Peter's has handled themselves this tournament, I would say that they are most definitely in that conversation.
Let's go into the Midwest, which we touched on earlier in the show. Let's go into Iowa State versus Miami. Miami shocked Auburn. Iowa State, you can say shocked Wisconsin, number 3. Hey, two underdogs going at it. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, they both have experience, so that really cancels each other out. Both these teams aren't exactly keen to go to the bench. So that could play a factor if foul trouble does come in, particularly with Miami. Their 2 foul participation rate at 6.5%, so it's not very high at all. Iowa State defense, Miami's offense, that's kind of what I'm looking for. The other side of the ball, those teams are just kind of average. Iowa State's offense, Miami's defense. But on the other side of the ball, you have a couple of teams that know what to do with themselves. Iowa State's defense ranked 5th nationally adjusted efficiency. Miami's offense in the top 20 in offense. So what you said, and particularly the turnover percentage battle too, which is actually very interesting. Iowa State defense, should say, 4th defensively in turnover percentage. Miami's offense 6th on the offensive side of the ball. So that might be a big battle right there, and to see where this turnover battle ends up. This is just so tight. This is just so impossible to call, because like both these teams have proven themselves. And the biggest question I have for Iowa State going into this tournament, which is why I asked them, is whether or not we see the non-conference version of Iowa State that went undefeated until the Big 12 play. And it seems like we have seen that version of Iowa State. So I really do like this as a competitive game, not the biggest marquee game in the world, but ultimately one of these teams is going to be handed over to Kansas, and they will probably end up being beat by Kansas. Like, I don't think there's any way about that for either of these programs, if I'm being quite honest.
There you go. Another close Sweet 16 match. Kansas, Providence. What did they need to do to keep it close against the number 1 Kansas?
This is going to be one of those instances to where I think Kansas, they have found a weapon coming off the bench in Remy Martin throughout the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. That just makes this team so dangerous. It's almost impossible to really keep a firm touch on 1 or 2 guys, because this Kansas team has proven they can balance out the scoring, share the scoring. They have all kinds of different weapons. And if Providence is going to win this game, they're going to keep the entire team in check, which is becoming a nearly impossible task with this Kansas team based on what we've seen. There are certainly guys in this Kansas team that know what they're doing. And the easy road, I mean, it really is one of those cases of who knows. They have great guys. Ochai Javi is one of those guys I just really like in this team. But Providence has proven they are a team. You know, there is not one or two stars on this Providence team. This is a true instance of a team coming together to do, quite frankly, things that we never saw coming with this Providence team. And for most people, a Sweet 16 was included in that. And so I would expect Providence to keep things close, and Providence in close games. There's just nothing else like it. But this Kansas team really gets to come together, keep that balanced scoring, keep that team mentality to really beat Providence. I think Kansas as a team, is better than Providence as a team. It's whether or not Kansas can bring in that team mentality and make it really tough for Providence to handle them.
And Ryan Christa from Hoopstock says this is not the best Kansas team.
Yeah, compared to other Kansas teams, that's exactly right. And they've just really had to find a way to get things done. Defensively, in particular, you're not going to find the most shining defenses of all time. It's just that the playmakers that Kansas has, I think, are better than what Providence has. And against either Iowa State or Miami, I think they'll have the advantage there. And it'll be what they're able to do to those playmakers that'll end up being the difference. I mean, Kansas really did get incredibly lucky to see Auburn and Wisconsin go down, because that's going to be March Madness. There's just nothing else I could really explain. There's just some teams that end up getting the better road than others because of what happens on the other sides of your brackets, and Kansas is one of those teams.
Ryan says one Bill Self's best coaching job.
That's certainly something I would agree with. I mean, I don't see too many of these Kansas players going on to do big things in the next level. I mean, able to mold together a team like that and be one of the better teams in the country. That's absolutely right.
All right, so let's go to the predictions with scores. Gonzaga, number 1 versus number 4, Arkansas. Give us a score, Nick.
Gonzaga should be able to win this by double digits. That is probably what I could give you there. I mean, Arkansas's shooting numbers aren't the best. Gonzaga knows how to limit that, particularly inside, and they know how to really score inside too. Of guys like Chet Holmgren. I mean, Drew Timme is fantastic. I would expect it to be a double-digit game.
Double-digit game. Number 3, Texas Tech versus number 2, Duke.
This is going to be one of those tough games, and it's going to come down to what Duke does. And Texas Tech's defense is just so good, and they're able to swarm. And Duke's lack of experience against a defense like that might be very, very difficult to contend to. I think the winner of this game is going to get beat by Gonzaga. This is just a standout one-possession game to me. And it's going to come down to those last few minutes, like it did in the Duke-Michigan State second-round game, which ultimately Duke was able to really come together and win that game. If they're going to win this game, they're going to do the exact same thing, because Texas Tech's going to give them a really good challenge.
Number 1, Arizona versus number 5, Houston. Give us a score or a prediction.
Yeah, that seeding is so, based on what we've seen this first weekend, that seeding is so misleading for this Houston team. And Arizona's going to have to be really smart in this game, because I think Houston can win this. I just don't think they will when it comes to Arizona. Their bigs are incredibly good. That will be a challenge that Houston's going to have to navigate. Arizona's guard, Benedict Mathurin, he is that guy. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's the individual players that Arizona has are better than Houston's. I think that ended up being the key difference. Another game I expect to come down to the final minute or so.
Michigan, number 11 versus number 2, Villanova.
I think Villanova will take this. And I do think it'll be somewhat comfortably. Again, the free throw shooting at Villanova is something to really keep in mind. The experience of this team, coached by Jay Wright, who has been there, done that. As far as coaching teams to national championships. Now, granted, there aren't too many NBA level guys on this team, like Ryan has commented, but it's a team that has that experience. And I think that'll lead itself to a Sweet 16 victory at the very least.
Yeah, as Ryan said, no great team, but no NBA players. Number 8, North Carolina versus number 4, UCLA. Give us a prediction there.
I think North Carolina has actually convinced me with its dominating level of play that I think they'll be able to overcome UCLA's tournament experience. Now, if this thing does get close, I mean, both these teams, pretty solid free throw shooter. North Carolina with a better team in that regard. But I would think that North Carolina, if they play the way they played in the first weekend, they should be able to beat UCLA. They should be able to get to the Final Four, in my opinion. Like, this is the kind of team that when their key guys are in there, Armando Bacot, Brady Manick, Caleb Love, like, this is a team that has really been so impressive over the last month or so. Like, they've done what they needed to do, whether it's beating Duke in Coach K's final home game at Cameron Indoor, whether it's beating Baylor, coming together when they had a 25-point lead slipping away, coming together to win it in overtime without several key pieces. This team has proven that they can really excel in almost all situations, and even when things are slipping away from them. And I think that'll be evident in this game for sure.
Number 3, Purdue versus St. Peter's. What's going to happen? Prediction, scoreline.
I think it could be a game that Purdue wins. Purdue just has too many individual key guys that are able to get the job done. I would not be surprised if St. Peter's defense gives Purdue problems initially in this game. I just think that Purdue's going to be able to rise above it, perhaps make the adjustments necessary to get the job done.
Number 1, Kansas versus number 4, Providence. Scoreline, prediction.
This should be a game that Kansas wins. I have all the respect in the world for what Providence is able to do this year. But Kansas as a team, I think, is better than Providence as a team. I think that will show.
Number 11, Iowa State versus number 10, Miami.
Oh, gosh. This is one of those games I just have a really hard time grappling with. Just because of, like, what we've mentioned, there's a couple of teams that sort of struggle in their respective conference plays, but have really excelled at the right time. I'm going to give this to Iowa State. I think the defense is going to be a pretty big factor in that. In that Miami, I don't think they're going to be able to shoot the three-pointer in particular quite as well as what they did. They may be able to get inside and get their scoring done from there, but if you're going to win tournament games like this, you better shoot the three pretty darn well. I mean, we've seen it cost so many teams this tournament, and I think Miami might fall victim to that.
Well, there you go. He goes against my team, Miami, but it's okay. We'll let the teams go at it and see what happens. There you have it. March Madness Sweet 16 resumes tomorrow, March 24th, and it should be an exciting weekend. And then, of course, we head into the nitty-gritty Final Four and the championship game. Before we go, poll question of the day, Nick. Which is the cutest puppy? Options are the Beagle, Golden Retriever, the French Bulldog, or other.
You know, I'm a sucker for those Golden Retrievers. I mean, those are, yeah. I mean, any dog's a good dog, right? Like, any dog's a good boy or a good girl. But I will definitely take my Golden Retrievers for sure.
Nick, you're part of the 33% that voted for the Golden Retriever, tied with Beagle at 33. Other is at 34.
Oh, wow.
So
wow,
we're going to have to see.
That is really split.
Yeah, pretty split there. French Bulldog 0. So we'll see if someone votes on it today. Nick, what is the best way to reach you online and also by your podcast, College Bonanza?
Yes, so obviously you can follow me on Twitter at Hodell Sports. Of course, I will for sure be tweeting all throughout the weekend on these games. The College Basketball Bonanza, you can follow us there on Twitter at College Bonanza. We're hopefully going to find some really good content along the way of the next the next weekend for the very least. But again, you can also search this on your preferred podcast platform at College Bonanza. You can find what myself, Dominic Stern, Dr. T had to say on the show from Sunday, and also our after party episode on Tuesday, which talks about some of the coaching carousel moves. Obviously, not including Matt McMahon. So we record these like a couple of days before release. So it's like, didn't quite get to the Matt McMahon at LSU, didn't quite get to the Lamont Paris to South Carolina, but we still got some good discussion there on just how insane the carousel has been already, and some of our breakdowns of some of these particular moves, whether I think they're a good hire or a bad hire. So make sure to check out both of those episodes. I think you'll really enjoy that.
Which the San Francisco coach is going to Florida. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that was that'll be fascinating. The transition from the WAC from the West Coast Conference, I can say, to the SEC, and there'll be other guys that have those pairs as well. I mean, Florida. You look at LSU, South Carolina, Mississippi State. They all took coach from mid majors and put in the SEC, which is just an increasingly really good basketball conference. So all four of those programs are going to have really good step ups with their coaches and trying to make sure they find their way in the SEC, because it's going to be very tough, particularly for Matt McMahon and LSU if LSU gets the sanctions that people are expecting.
College basketball making a splash this month, but of course, coaching moves. And you can reach us at thesportscast.net, our website, or the Sportscast1 on Twitter and also Instagram. We'll be tweeting throughout the day. A lot of news today. Of course, Tyreek Hill going to the Miami Dolphins. Big move there. And of course, we have the Jersey Boys Sports Talks tomorrow to lay all that out, flesh it out for you guys to understand what's happening in the NFL free agency. But tomorrow, March Madness begins, and looking forward to what's going to happen. Any upset, will it continue? Hey, that's why the tournament is here. Anyways, Nick, I really appreciate you coming on to the Sportscast.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
And this was your update.